Hi, I'm so happy to be here. If I had known the weather was going to be like this, I may not have been here. But I'm from Texas. This is freezing to me. It's supposed to be 80 in San Antonio tomorrow, and I sat in my hotel room and I called my husband and I said, "It is snowing on the beach." I didn't even know it could snow on the beach. I didn't know that was a real thing. I was just amazed. So, and I'm also going to tell you, since I'm going to talk about marriage tonight, that I want you to know my husband just texted me like 2 seconds ago and was like, "Now what's the deal with soccer carpool tonight? Am I supposed to pick up?" I'm like, "Hi. I'm doing a thing right now. Can you call another mom and maybe figure out without me having to text, because I'm about to go up on stage right now." So anyway, the thing about marriage, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, and that's what the Antelope in the Living Room is about. And so I thought I would start by telling you, because some of you are probably like, "What is the Antelope in the Living Room? What does that even mean? I don't understand." And I hate to tell you, but tonight I'm going to do nothing to dispel any Texas stereotypes. I'm essentially going to confirm that it is a backwoods country of its own, that it's different than the rest of the country. My husband is a hunter, because that's what a lot of men do in Texas. And several years ago, he had the chance to go down to the King Ranch, which is a big ranch down in Texas, and he got to shoot a nilgai antelope. I didn't know what a nilgai antelope was. I just knew that all of a sudden we had all this meat in our freezer, because a nilgai antelope weighs 2,000 pounds. So we had 2,000 pounds approximately of antelope meat in our freezer. What he neglected to tell me was that he had also taken this 2,000-pound animal to the taxidermist and had it stuffed and mounted. I did not realize this until I got home from a very stressful road trip with my friends right before Thanksgiving. We had brought our kids with us. Our kids acted terrible in that way where you want to drop them off at a fire station and see if they can be put up for adoption, like the Moses Law, but later. Like, I know they're 8, but they're cute. Maybe somebody will want them. So we get home, and I walk in, and Perry, my husband, has hung this antelope. We live in kind of it's a quaint, little 1920s cottage-style house, so it doesn't lend itself to large taxidermy. And I walked in, and he had hung this enormous antelope right by our front door in such a way where it looked like a scene out of the newspaper where an antelope crashed through the front of somebody's house. Like a tragedy had befallen our house. I mean, because this thing, when I say an antelope, you may be picturing African, pretty horns, that kind of thing. No, it looked like a satanic cow. It's kind of a goat with a huge head. And I just walked in and I looked at it and I go, "What? Why do you hate me? Why is that in our house? I don't understand." And he was like, "It's my antelope. Isn't it gorgeous?" And I was like, "No, it's really not. It is ugly and I hate it and it's in my house." And he thought he was so funny, surprising me with this antelope, and I was so mad. And so for the next 3 days, we spoke to each other. You know those polite things you do with each other, with your spouse, where you just talk about what you have to talk about? You know, like, who's driving carpool? I guess you are. Are you packing our lunch? Yeah, I'm packing our lunch. You know, just that. And so I thought, that's marriage. We all have our antelopes in the living room. Some of them are real, unfortunately, and some of them are proverbial. But in marriage, we all have our things that we don't always talk about, but they're a big eyesore, and they can be a big eyesore. And it makes me think of, a while back I read this quote, and it was one of those funny things kids say article. And one of the things it said is they had asked a little kid, they said, how can you tell if two strangers are married? And the little boy answered, he said, "I don't know. I mean, you just have to look and see if they're yelling at the same kids." And I was like, that's it. And maybe sometimes if they're yelling at each other. Because I will tell you, too, that the other day I walked in my house, and it's been cold in San Antonio, colder than normal. And I walked in, and I kind of smelled this smell. And I was like, something smells. I was like, "Do you smell something?" And he's like, "No, I don't smell anything." And I said, "No." I said, "It stinks. Something in our house stinks." And he's like, "Oh." He said, "Well, I put my hunting boots in the oven to warm them up before I leave." And I was like, "That's our oven where we cook our food. You know, that's where we cook for our family. That's not civilized. Nobody wants to come to our house and eat after your hunting boots have been in the oven." So marriage constantly catches you by surprise, and those are the things that you don't know, because it all starts off and we walk down the aisle in a white dress, and it's this glorious day, and we're like wedding day Barbie, and our hair is fixed and our makeup's fixed, and we think we're going to love our in-laws so much. You know, we're so excited to be part of this family that later we're going to be like, "God, if I have to spend another holiday with them, I would just rather not celebrate Christmas." You know, that's where I am. But it's so hard, and it's the phenomenon, it's real marriage. It's a push and a pull, and it's beauty, and it's ugly, and it's messy, and it's fun, and it's this adventure that nothing can prepare us for. And sometimes it leaves us wanting to pull every single hair out, and some days we want to throw the whole thing away, and then some days we think we never love them more. My best friend and I always say, if there's a day where I'm telling you that I've never loved my husband more, in about 24 hours I'm going to be calling you saying, I think I'm leaving him. I think we're getting divorced. But in a world where I think they're so quick to tell us that marriage is so devalued and that it's not important and that you can throw it away and that the grass may be greener on the other side, I feel like there's all this talk about how to be a world changer and how to change the world. And I think as women, one of the most profound things we can do to leave a legacy and to change our world is to work on our marriage and to give our kids the gift of a mom and dad who have stayed together and who love them. And listen, I know that's not always easy. I'm saying that as a child whose parents were divorced when I was 8. I know that life is hard and marriages don't work and bad things happen. But I also think that there comes a time where we don't just leave because it seems like it's going to be hard. Sometimes you just have to say, the grass isn't greener. And the thought that there's a soulmate, you know who your soulmate is? The person that you've already vowed to spend the rest of your life with. Because ultimately, all men are really kind of the same in a lot of ways. They really are. I mean, you can trade yours in, but then you're just going to have to get to know what the other one does. It gets on your nerves. So you might as well just stay with the one you have, because at least you know. But I was going to read y'all a passage tonight out of Judges, and I think this is such an interesting story, and it's not about marriage at all, but when I read it, it kind of applied to me into marriage. And in it, there's a story, it's Gideon, and Gideon lived in the land, he was with the Israelites, and there was a people called the Midianites, and they had come in and they were attacking the Israelites. They were stealing their food, they had taken over their land, and it was just really a bad situation. And I'm going to start in Judges 6, 3-6. And it says, whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern people invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count the men and their camels, and they invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. And to me, in some ways, that's such a picture of our marriage, because I feel like our marriages can be under attack in every single way. And not by, sometimes by foreign people, but by stresses of life and by finances and by pressures and all these things. And they're coming in to attack us. And we can feel like it's under attack. And we just want to give up because we think, I can't handle this. This is more than I can handle. I wasn't prepared for this and these challenges. But what I thought was so interesting is an angel appears to Gideon as he's hiding in this wine press, and says to him, greetings, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And at that time, Gideon was hiding. He was anything but a mighty warrior. But what God said to him, he says, the Lord is with you. And Gideon says, but sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Where are all these wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us into the hand of Midian. And the Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? But Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest and I am the least. And the Lord answered, I will be with you. And I think the lesson there is go in the strength that you have. Sometimes with your marriage, God is saying, I know you don't have much strength, but if you will muster up every bit of strength you have and go in that strength, then I'll be with you. I'm going to carry you the rest of the way, and I'm going to help you do what you need to do to help save this marriage or to help stick with this thing or to help even live through your days of singleness if that's where you are in life, that God is going to be with you to go in the strength that you have, and he comes alongside us and doesn't expect us to do it on our own. And in that, there's a couple of things that I've learned about marriage along the way. I'm just going to tell you that I have only been married 16 years, some of them happy, some of them not. The hunting boot day was a bad day. So I'm no expert, the verdict is still out. I always say I have a 10-year-old daughter. I have a 16-year-old marriage. I don't know how either one of them are going to turn out. I hope okay. We'll see. I'll come back in 20 years and tell you it either worked or it didn't. But just a couple of things that I feel like in marriage sometimes we struggle with. And the first one is to not give in to comparison. In today's world, there has never been so many ways to compare ourselves to other women. Between Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and blogs, it's like everybody's living a better life than we are. You go on Pinterest, I'm like, everybody's house is prettier than mine. Everybody's house apparently was decorated out of Pottery Barn, except for mine. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to artfully place flowers on my wall in a way that looks like they just appeared up there, but everybody else apparently does. Instagram, it's people, they're kids, and they're playing board games, and it's filtered light and whatever. It's not a real thing. That's the only time they played a board game with their kid all year. And they're like, I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to filter it with Nashville so it looks very vintage. But we buy into that, and we start feeling this guilt of everybody is playing with their kids, and everybody's, going out on date night with their husband, and everybody's doing this fabulous stuff. I have a friend on Facebook, I'm not even kidding you, who makes these lunches for her kids every day that are absurd. I mean, like carves poodles out of cauliflower and puts them in the lunch. And every day, she posts them on Facebook every morning. And what I want to say to her is, you need to get a job. You need to get a part-time job because you have too much time on your hands if you're carving cauliflower. And the day that she did an R2-D2 out of cheese and ham for a Star Wars themed lunch, I wanted to say, your future daughter-in-law is going to hate your guts. You are ruining your son. She is going to hate you because this is what you've set, this precedent of R2-D2 lunches. And for the rest of her life, she's going to have to hear, well, my mom used to make these lunches that look like whatever. But there's so many ways to compare ourselves, and I think we can start thinking that other women have more romance, or they have their husbands do more, and their marriage is easier, and that maybe ours would be easier with somebody else, and maybe there's a better answer out there. And I don't think that that's true. I think that that's a lie, and I think we all have the same struggles. I just think sometimes it's hard to be honest about them and just to say, we struggle with this, and my husband gets on my nerves about this, and this is a hard spot for us because we don't want to be vulnerable like that. And so we put forward this beautiful facade that looks the way we want it to look, and we all buy into it. And I think just like men get into this thing where they can get wrapped up in a world of physical porn, I think women can get wrapped up in emotional porn, where we read these stories in these books and see these movies, and I just said porn at the country club. So let's deal with that. Let's see if I get to come back again someday. But don't let somebody else's marriage define you. And if you're single in this room, I will tell you this too. Don't set that up as your end-all be-all. Because you know what? Marriage is great, and it can be wonderful if it's to the right person. But ultimately, it's not going to fill anything in you. It's not going to fill anything in you if you haven't let God fill that, and if you aren't secure in who you are and who God has made you to be. Because even in marriage, I think sometimes some of the loneliest days we feel sometimes are in marriage, because we think, I thought I was supposed to have this husband who understood me and loved me and was supposed to know exactly when, like in the movies, to look at me and say, you complete me. And instead what he says is, I clogged the toilet, and do you know where the plunger is? And that doesn't necessarily feel like what we read about in the books, So that's the first thing, is just not to get caught up in the comparison game. When I first got married, that was such a big thing because we were friends with this other couple, and they did everything together. They grocery shopped together. He wanted to go shopping with her to the mall. And I kept thinking, what's wrong with us? Like, I don't think do we not love each other? Because I don't want to. And so finally, Perry one day said, you want to go to the store together? Because I would always come home and I'd be like, well, I just don't think that we don't do stuff together. And he went to the store with me one time, and he hasn't been back since, because I didn't want him at the store with me. I don't need to know his thoughts on bread or what we should buy or what kind of cheese or whatever. No. So just everybody's marriage is as unique as their own DNA, as the two people that make up. And you and your husband have to figure out, because the marriage isn't going to look like your parents' marriage looked. It's not going to look like your neighbor's marriage looked. It's going to look like your marriage. So that's the first thing. The second is to protect your time together. And especially for moms of young kids, this is one of those things that I feel like is easy before you have kids, and then you have kids, and you realize, like, at the end of the day, when you've had a toddler pulling on you all day, you put that toddler to bed and you look at your husband and you want to say, if you touch me, you're going to die. Because what I need right now is a glass of wine and a People magazine, and for you to not even look at me, because I don't need another person hanging on me. I've had somebody hanging on me all day. I think those are the hardest years, just when you have the little bitties, and it's so hard to take that time away, and you feel guilty when you leave because you want to be there for your kids, and it's hard to find that balance. But you've got to carve time out to spend as a couple. One of the smartest things one of my older friends told me is she said, you need to invest in your marriage because you're going to look up, because those kids are there for 18 years, and they're going to be gone, and you don't want to look across the table and be looking at a stranger. You know, you need to know that man that you married, and that's hard because you've got so much pulling on your time, but just to spend that time. And even if you're not, I think you can get caught up in that, even if you don't have young kids, and just living your separate lives and just kind of doing your thing. And you've got your hobbies, and he likes to do this, and you live these separate lives, but just to make time to come together and figure out something that you do together. I mean, and that's, for my husband and I, we're so opposite. I mean, I always say we're never going to play golf together because neither one of us play golf, and we haven't really come up with a hobby yet that we can do, but we will. We enjoy going to eat dinner together, so that's a victory. We like to go to a nice restaurant. We like to eat dinner. We like to talk about our separate interests, and that's what we do. So you just have to find something that brings you together where you'll spend time together. And as a little addendum in that, if this was an outline, envision an outline, it's going to be, I'm going to say you need to have sex with your husband. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. And that's, there again, I'm at the country club. But I'm just going to go ahead and say it because you know what? There's all those books about like how to tell his love language. You know what his love language is? Sex. That's what I'm going to tell you. Men can't say that. They have to act like, oh, it's gifts of service. It's when you tell me words of affirmation. No, probably it's sex. But they can't say that. It's not politically correct. And I kind of kid, I mean, a little bit. But I just think it's important. I just think that your husband needs to know. I think that your husband needs to know that you love him and that you want him and that you're attracted to him. And I think it does wonders for your marriage. And I remember a friend told me one time, if you feel it in your pinky toe, you need to get the will to do it. So there you have it. And sometimes you barely feel it in your pinky toe. The third thing is to remember to laugh. Sometimes I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, the reason we're still married is because you make me laugh. That really is your saving grace, because as much as you drive me crazy, the fact that we can laugh together even when life is hard, and you know, we have had hard years and hard times, but if we can find a way to say, I cannot believe that our bills were that much this month and that we had this happen, and here we are eating our $1 hamburger helper stroganoff and kind of laugh about it and find the joy. I think that just helps to remember like why you fell in love with him in the first place. And I feel like humor can cover a lot and make you remember why you were with him in the first place. And bonus points if you can manage to make him laugh when you're having a dumb fight, because sometimes that ends a fight really quick if you can think of something funny to say. The fourth one, and this is a hard one, is to forgive and move on. Some of the biggest fights I know I've had in my marriage are when I've let all these little things build up, you know, because we don't want to get into it right now. It's going to take too much effort to get into it. And so we tend to bury things and we hide things and we act like everything's okay and we can placate and be like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. And then the next thing you know, you're screaming at each other about when to take the hamburgers off the grill. And that's not really even the issue. The issue is because you feel like he's being selfish, because he doesn't see you, because he's not, you know, doing enough around the house, because he's leaving you to do stuff by yourself. And you've got to communicate and you've got to let them know that, hey, these are our problems. I need to be honest with you about this. This has hurt my feelings and this is going on. Because then he can say he's sorry, because he probably needs to say he's sorry. And then sometimes you have to be the one to say you're sorry, but then you can move on. And forgiveness is so important. And I think that can be hard, especially when there have been really deep hurts. And I think that's the thing about marriage, is sometimes there are really deep hurts. I mean, you know, we laugh about taking out the trash, but there can be affairs, there can be betrayals, there can be all these things that are deep, deep hurts. And, you know, only you know if you can move on from those. Only you know if you can move on from some of those deeper hurts. But I know that in the book of Ezekiel that God says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you, and I will trade your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And sometimes that's my prayer in my marriage is, God, right now I have a heart of stone. Like I'm so angry right now, and I don't know how I'm going to get past this. But that I pray that God would give me a heart of flesh and that he would help me remember the reasons why I fell in love with my husband and why he's dear to me and why this is worth fighting for. A dear friend of mine once said, and I think it's so true, that sometimes the best part of staying married is being glad later that you did. You know, in that moment, it doesn't feel like the right thing, and there can be years, but sometimes it's looking back and going, you know what, we stayed the course and now we're reaping the benefits of that. And then 5 is it's always a work in progress. You know, I used to hear about couples, and I think it's discouraging and interesting to me at the same time, because you'll hear about a couple like they were married for 35 years and they got divorced. And I'd be like, well, God, you stuck out 35 years. I mean, what's what's the point? Like, you couldn't hang in for another 20? Whatever. You were over halfway there. You're probably at the halfway point. But now that I've been married 16, it makes so much sense, because I think I used to think you'd get to this point in marriage where you kind of arrived, where you were there, and it was like, oh, this is easy. We've got it figured out. And I hate to tell you, I don't think there's ever a point that you have it figured out. Because it's not that you have a marriage with problems, it's that you have two people with problems who make up a marriage. So you both bring in all your garbage and all your junk and all your stuff, and whatever's affecting you is affecting him, and whatever affecting him is affecting you, and it can just be so hard sometimes. It's a work in progress. But the thing is that God says that he is before all things, and in him all things hold together, and it's not our job always to hold our marriage together. Sometimes I think it's just asking God, I need the strength for today, I need the strength for tomorrow. And one of the stories I tell that for me, that I always, when marriage seems hard to me, when my parents got divorced, I was 8 years old. And so now at this point, what is that? Let's do the math. They've been divorced 35 years. They still can barely be in the same room together, which is fine. But there was a day that we were watching, they'd both come to my daughter's softball game, a little t-ball game, and she was 5. And they were sitting there on opposite sides of the stands with each of their spouses watching. And I just thought, if there was ever a day, I would hate to think that for no good reason, just because I thought this was hard, that Perry and I weren't here watching Caroline together, watching her kids together someday, play baseball and do all these things and all that. And I say that with, I look at the reasons my parents got divorced, and there were legitimate, real reasons. And I know that there are real reasons to walk away from a marriage. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And, I don't want anybody to be like, well, my husband did this and this, because I know that there are real hardships that go on in marriage. But I think in that, is it a real hardship, or is it just that you don't want to anymore? Does it seem easier, and are you buying into a lie that says it's going to be easier with somebody else? Because like I said, I think fundamentally a lot of men are the same. We love them, but they're different shapes and sizes, but they're all going to have something that gets on our nerves. And chances are we're probably not going to find the one that knows exactly when to say a line like, who? I was going to say Tom Cruise, but that's a bad example now. Ryan Gosling, how's that? Let's see. There we go. Let's go with that, when he knows how to say a good line. But ultimately, God gave us this person. He gave us our spouse. He knew all of our strengths and weaknesses. He knew all of our spouse's strengths and weaknesses. He knew that for some reason that we would be a good match, even though there may feel like days that you're like a rabid dog and a cat that have been thrown in a house together and told to make it work, maybe hosed down and like, okay, have at it. But he made that for a reason, and he knows that as iron sharpens iron, that you can refine your spouse, and that your spouse can refine you, and that you can work things out, and they can make you the person that you never would be. I laugh. My husband, he drives me crazy. For years before I wrote a book, he would always at dinner, he would do this thing where he would go, how's that book coming? And I would just want to go, shut up. Why do you want to bring that up? I was having a good day. But But it's that reminder that sometimes you need to be pushed. We all need to be pushed, and we all need that person who's going to encourage us and cheer us on and make us better than we would have been. And I would still be sitting on a couch somewhere watching Real Housewives tonight. I would, I promise, of Atlanta, because I think it's the craziest one. And if you're going to watch, you might as well go full crazy. Why watch halfway normal people? But it's that thing of looking back and going, this person has made me better, and this person has pushed me in ways that I wouldn't have pushed myself, and knowing that God has done that. And so, in closing, I would just say, I look for marriages, and in the book of Lamentations, which I marked, I hope I did, Lamentations 3:22, it says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, and therefore I will wait for him. And God's mercies are new every morning. They're new for wherever you are in your life, that you can wake up and go, you know what, today was a bad day. And don't we all have those? I feel like I have them more as a mom, almost as a wife, where you go, you know what, today was a bad day. I lost my temper. I was mad. I was not a good mom. I did not offer you the support that you needed. But God's mercies are new every morning, and that he's going to cover our weaknesses and he's going to cover our strengths. And just like he said to Gideon, he's going to tell us to go in the strength that we have, and he will come alongside us and give us the strength that we need to get through another day. Thank you.